No, it's good. You can leave it there. Okay, we'll begin. Om Ajnantimirandasya Niranjana Shalakaya Chakshunumilitamena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. So, one is born in the darkness of ignorance, and we offer our obeisances to the spiritual teacher who has opened our eyes with the torch of knowledge. That is the meaning of the verse. We're reading from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verses 1 through 10. We're going to be taking that passage. For those of you who have a Bhagavad Gita, you can read along. Otherwise, I'm going to read myself here online. Verses 1 through 10, chapter 2. So I'll read the passage. Wish there was a way to share screens on this. It probably is, but I just don't know the science. We'll have to do that next time. Figure it out. 1 through 10. So Sanjay said, seeing Arjuna full of compassion, his mind depressed, his eyes full of tears, Madhusudana Krishna spoke the following words. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, my dear Arjuna, how have these impurities come upon you? So he's on the verge of a mental breakdown, and Krishna is just speaking very strongly. He's rebuking him. This is therapy. My dear Arjuna, old school style, how have these impurities come upon you? They are not at all befitting a man who knows the value of life. They lead not to higher planets, but to infamy. O son of Pritha, do not yield to this degrading impotence. It does not become you. Give up such petty weakness of heart and arise, O chastiser of the enemy. Arjuna said, O killer of enemies, O killer of Madhu, how can I counterattack with arrows in battle men like Bhishma and Drona who are worthy of my worship? So Krishna rebukes Arjuna. Arjuna is very attached, so he continues expressing his attachment. He's not wanting to relinquish it. So, O killer of enemies, O killer of Madhu, how can I counterattack with arrows in battle men like Bhishma and Drona who are worthy of my worship? It would be better to live in this world by begging than to live at the cost of the lives of great souls who are my teachers. Even though desiring worldly gain, they are superiors. If they are killed, everything we enjoy will be tainted with blood. Nor do we know which is better, conquering them or being conquered by them. If we kill the sons of Dhritarashtra, we should not care to live. Yet they are now standing before us on the battlefield. Now I am confused about my duty and have lost all composure because of miserly weakness. In this condition, I am asking you to tell me for certain what is best for me. Now I am your disciple and a soul surrender unto you. Please instruct me. I can find no means to drive away this grief which is drying up my senses. I will not be able to dispel it even if I win a prosperous, unrivaled kingdom on earth with sovereignty like the demigods in heaven. Sanjay said, having spoken thus, Arjuna, chastiser of enemies, told Krishna, Govinda, I shall not fight, and fell silent. O descendant of Bharata, at that time Krishna, smiling in the midst of both the armies, spoke the following words to the grief-stricken Arjuna. So this is the passage. There are a few important points to bring up about this passage. The first point is that Arjuna's argument, as we tried to elaborate on last week, although ostensibly or prima facie looked like very nice arguments were being made, because all those arguments were based on attachment due to the emotional turmoil that was going on inside. So Krishna responds to Arjuna not with reason, but with an emotional rebuke. In other words, Krishna did not take very seriously what he was saying because it was informed by attachment and emotional turmoil and not by something that was actually well-reasoned, right? Like sometimes persons are very attached to something and they make all sorts of fancy arguments, but it's all based on attachment. And our problem is we tend to give that too much serious consideration, right? Like, yeah, they have this nonviolent communication and our Krishna is not applying this nonviolent communication here. He said, what is this? You're a coward. That is exactly nonviolent communication. But we have this sort of thing where, nonviolent communication, you should hear them out, let them process their feelings and so on. This may be some modern method of therapy and so on. It may have its place, of course. But it is not to be taken very seriously because it is based on attachment. So why it should be taken seriously? In other words, it's based on the very same ignorance that informs any other sort of lunacy that we wouldn't take so seriously. You can think of many things that you wouldn't take so seriously because it is informed by ignorance. And this is just a similar thing. So Krishna does not take very seriously at all what Arjuna is saying. Rather, he rebukes him. He says, why at this time you are acting like this? Again, we mentioned this last week. It is just like if someone is attacking a woman outside, some huge dude, like 250 pound, like muscle, crazy guy. He's like accosting some lady. So I'm a very skinny fellow. I'm not going to challenge him for obvious reasons. So then I call the police to come and deal with this fellow. And the police come, and at that time he decides to meditate. So is that a proper time for meditation? Meditation classes at 5:45 at Bhakti Center. But this is time when it's time for doing your job of stopping this big guy. That is not the time for meditation. So Krishna is saying how at this time this weakness has come upon you. This is nonsense. And then he uses 3 words here that I'm going to write on the board here. I guess I should try to angle this in such a way. He uses 3 words here to describe Arjuna. He says this is anarya jushtam. This actually is a very important term. Oh my God, these pens. Can we get something? Huh? It looks like I was just writing on. Okay, this is about it. Okay. Anarya jushtam. He refers to Arjuna as Anarya jushtam. And he also refers to, he says also aswargyam. These are kind of important terms. The first one particularly, which I'll focus on, akirtikaram. And the last term, hridaya dobrayam. These 2 terms particularly, this first one and this third one are actually quite related. So Krishna says that what you're speaking is anarya jushtam. So anarya jushtam means this is the practice of the anaryans, or those who are not Aryan. This word Aryan, of course, has unfortunately been co-opted by a very unpleasant group historically. But the word Aryan is a Sanskrit word, and it refers to persons. Our commentators describe that the word Aryan refers to persons who were interested in enlightenment. They were called as Aryans. And they follow the process of putting their duties before their emotions. Because by putting the general understanding, and we'll get to this when we describe the yoga processes in the Gita, by following your dharma as directed by the sacred text, you get purified. And by purification, you become liberated. So an Aryan was one who put their dharma before their emotional states. What is the duty that is meant for them to accomplish? Because emotions are unpredictable. They actually manifest according to karmic reactions. So you're going to say how you're going to be feeling at any particular moment. All of a sudden you feel angry and you just start being sassy with everyone. You have experience like this. Suddenly you just, for no reason, giving attitude, giving sass, and giving, tea, whatever all these terms are being used today. And for no reason you act like that. And then, an hour later, you're like, okay, I feel better now. You already got the brunt of the first part of the bad attitude. So you yourself are upset about that. And then an hour later, like, I feel better. And you're like, so the emotions are like this. They're very unpredictable. Krishna will later on say they're like the change of seasons. They can come suddenly. Especially, I'm from Chicago. You can experience all the seasons in one day also. Winter, one day, summer, and later in the day, fall, later in the day. Like this in one day, you experience all the different seasons. So the mind is like this, unpredictable. So in Vedic culture, you'll get this sense that they did not take emotions too seriously. This is also what is meant by Hridaya Dorbaya. Hridaya Dorbaya means weakness of heart. So the weakness of heart is that one is giving more value to the emotional states than one is giving to their duty, their prescribed duty, which is meant for purification and from their liberation. So when one is doing that, they are said to have a weak heart. So Arjuna is giving all these fancy arguments, but Krishna says this is just due to a weak heart. You're giving undue importance to the emotional states, or are unpredictable and basically not useful for the purpose of, obviously the purpose is purification and spiritualization, and it's not even useful for you having just a happy state of mind or peace. And this is a Narayana. So an Aryan is one who will put his duty before his emotional disposition. He may be feeling this, he may be feeling that, but I have a duty to accomplish. And in fact, in one sense, that's the only way you can deal with emotions. Or you say the culture of Dharma is a container to make sure that our emotional states do not actually deviate us from our highest good, or achieving our highest good. If you didn't have boundaries for the emotional states, and those emotions just will cause you to sink and be destroyed. I often think of it like playing a game. I like ping pong. There are other games that people may like. So then it is the boundaries of the rules that make the game actually exciting, that there is an out of bounds. I remember playing basketball in the hood, and it was always very dangerous because there were no rules. There was no out of bounds. There was no fouls. And especially in basketball, there's such a thing like a foul, which is like very important. But when I would go to the west side of Chicago, which is almost as bad as the south side of Chicago, which is quite famous at this point in North America, there would be no fouls. So it'd be like very someone could come and just like slap you practically, and you couldn't say foul. It was like that was just part of the game. So it becomes very dangerous. It's the rules that allow the game to be fun and also contains it in such a way that you can have an exciting game. Similarly, the airplane takes off at the airport. It's constrained to take off only at the airport. And by that constraint, it is able to go high in the sky. So rules create a certain boundary also for our emotional states, a way in which to process and look at our emotional states. And one who gives more importance to their emotional state than to the duty that is to be performed, then Krishna said, this is Anarya-dushnam. This is the practice of Anaryans. And it is Hridaya Durbaya. It is a weak heart. So this, anyway, this is something to consider in terms of the culture today, because the culture we have today gives a lot of importance to emotions, and people spend lots and lots of money on therapists. Which again, I'm not disparaging that per se and saying it may have its place in society. But it's a very different culture, and you have a very different conversation when you're putting Dharma at the head of the conversation versus putting emotions at the head of the conversation. It's a very different sort of discussion. And you'll get a lot of this sense throughout the Bhagavad Gita, Dharma over emotional states, which are unpredictable. Krishna says in the Gita, one of my favorite verses, we'll see from 7:27, Itra dvesha samutena, dvanda mohena bharata, sarva bhutani samoham, sarge yanti parantapa. He says every living being in this world is born completely deluded. Sarva samoham, I know there are certain ideas that everyone has like enlightened, and new age spirituality is there. But Krishna has a different opinion. He said everyone is born completely deluded by their impressions of desire and hate. I like this, I don't like that. And these impressions are there from long time standing. So everyone is born completely deluded. And if you give too much importance to that, then you'll be deviated from the path of spiritual development, spiritual growth. So he says, this is not befitting an Aryan. This is just a weak heart. So looking at our little outline here, for those of you who are following online. So here, Krishna's rebuke. So I'm looking at the bullet points. Krishna's initial response is that Arjuna's processing is nothing but an emotional outpouring, not worthy of a reasoned response. So notwithstanding Arjuna's ostensibly well-reasoned arguments, Krishna says it's simply grounded on weakness of heart. So I've just described that now. Thus, Krishna just calls out this defect, i.e., namely, analysis informed by emotional bewilderment, as opposed to well-reasoned and dispassionate adherence to truth as the basis of his analysis. So his interest wasn't in what's right and what's true. His interest was what will satisfy me emotionally. One of the big problems that happens in modern discussions, people want to do what feels good instead of do what's right or do what is progressive, actually progressive. So Krishna rebukes him for this reason. So in verses 4 through 10, Arjuna's response is the same because he's attached. He has this, as I put it here in the outline, this mental inertia. The mental inertia means the mind is accustomed to acting or moving in a certain way, so it doesn't want to move in another way. And so how does Arjuna respond? With the same attachment. So I have here, Krishna's rebuke is not enough to spur Arjuna into action. Although Arjuna's basis is emotional turmoil, it will take more than the emotional response to change his mind. You can think of like the modern political situation where someone blows up and gets out of control, and then the other person also gets emotional, and then the whole situation becomes unpleasant for everybody. So it's going to take more than emotional chastisement to galvanize Arjuna into action, fighting the war. So Arjuna in verses 4 through 6, he continues to express his attachments and his inability to fight because of those attachments. Now looking at those verses, there is one thing I wanted to pull up here. After expressing that, Arjuna, this is verse 6, this is a very important verse. He says, nor do we know which is better, conquering them or being conquered by them. If we kill the sons of Dhritarashtra, we should not care to live, yet they are now standing before us on the battlefield. So at a certain point, he becomes indecisive what should actually be done. So all of his analysis based on his attachment led him to be indecisive, inconclusive, and it sent him going deep into an existential crisis. So our commentators make a very beautiful point about this in 2.6. Let me see if I can pull this up. This is actually a very important point. Arjuna, although he's in a state of bewilderment, his thinking represents the qualifications of a person who's ready to receive spiritual knowledge. So Srila Prabhupada, as well as our acharyas, they offer a very important comment here about the qualities of a student who's ready to receive spiritual knowledge. So they mention 4 qualities, which I mentioned here also. Again, Arjuna is in a state of bewilderment. All his arguments are based on attachment, but he possesses the qualities by which he can come out of this, the qualities of a genuine spiritual student. So a verse is quoted from one Upanishad that mentions 4 qualities. I'll mention them here. The first one is called Shanta Danta. This means mind and sense control. Of course, Arjuna is not exactly expressing the greatest mind and sense control because he's in a heightened state of emotional turmoil. But the reason for this is given, I'm going to point out, it says in verse 32 of the first chapter, he shows control of his senses and mind when he says, what is the use of kingdom, enjoyment, and living? So this was a demonstration of his mind and sense control, because you would not be able to say like that. Suppose you have to fight in this war, but after the war, you'll get so much riches, and then you'll say, well, okay, that's not so bad. Just like we were watching this movie, Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon, and it's a story about Saint Francis of Assisi. And he goes off to war, and his father is making large money because of the spoils of war. And he's like, yeah, the war is very bad, but because the money is there, that is very nice. Because his senses are attached to that. Of course, you might like to think that you would not be like that, but you never know until the money's in hand. Once the money's in hand, you'll be amazed how you can think. So Arjuna shows some level of mind and sense control because he's saying, even if I have money, I will not be happy. Second quality that is mentioned is uparita. Yes, uparita. I can quote the Sanskrit verse, but uparita means indifference. So I'll just read the comment here. This is an important one. Arjuna shows indifference to the enjoyment of this life and the next life in verse 35 of the first chapter, with the statement, I do not desire to kill them, even if I have sovereignty over the 3 worlds. So in the Vedic culture, there's the terrestrial realm, there's also the celestial realm, and there's the subterranean realm as well. I'm trying to use like fancy language, because Because if you say heaven and stuff, people get freaked out. Heaven, hell, the subterranean, terrestrial, and celestial realm. These called the three worlds. So he said, even if I rule over the three worlds, I'll not be able to get any satisfaction from this. So he shows indifference to all these things. So this indifference is also required for receiving a little spiritual knowledge. Third quality that's mentioned here, and this is a very important one, titikshuhu. Titikshuhu means tolerance. And tolerance here refers to being able to tolerate duality. Success, failure, good, bad, happiness and distress, concepts I don't like, concepts I do like. This is called titikshu, meaning tolerant and enduring in both cases. This is also required. And the fourth one, which is mentioned in verse 7, which we'll get to because it's a very important verse, is faith in the teacher. Shraddha Shandanvito, faith in the teacher. Oops, I'm going to put the Sanskrit word here. Shraddhanvito. Faith in teacher, the guru, basically, the sacred text. So in verse 7 of this chapter, Arjuna is demonstrating this. So basically, and I mentioned this before, in Vedic culture, to receive knowledge, you have to approach a teacher. Modern culture means that if I want to learn something, I go to Amazon.com, order some book. I go to YouTube, check out some different content creators. But if you wanted to actually learn in Vedic culture, you have to go to a teacher. Also, there weren't so many books in print. So you practically had to go to a teacher, and you had to be able to demonstrate that you were a worthy student. I often give the example of, I grew up watching martial art flicks, and one of them is The Next Karate Kid or The Karate Kid. And when he goes to the sensei, he wants to learn karate, but they want to see if he's a worthy student for learning. So he gives him like a rag, and he says, okay, you clean the car. Wax on, wax out. Y'all know this? I know I'm not that old. I'm a little older, but I'm not that old. So wax on, wax off, right? And then the kid is like, what is this? I can't learn martial arts. I didn't come here to clean a car. He said it begins with this wax on, wax off, because he's testing the student to see if he's ready to do menial service, if he's ready to accept a humble position. Because there's no use in teaching a student who doesn't have respect for the knowledge. This is not meant to be okay. Those who live in the temple, don't take this as a personal thing. It's just an observation. But it's a point about the culture, actually, just about the culture. In order to have respect for the knowledge, and I gave this analogy last time in our first class, you have to be a little humble. And humility means you have to take a lower position, right? Just like if you want to transfer water from one cup to another, one cup has to go lower. I gave this example already. So in the Gita, also you hear this word when you surrender to the Guru, Taividi Pranipatina. Pranipatina means to literally bow your head. So the idea is that in order to receive knowledge, you have to come below it. So this is just a culture thing. Don't take it. Anyway, I feel like I have to qualify this. But even when the teacher is sitting, you're supposed to sit below the teacher. Therefore, they have the Vyasa-san sits a little bit high, and the students will come close to the teacher and they will sit below. Because the idea is to be receptive to the knowledge. The knowledge has to be above you, not only in terms of its ontological position, it's higher than you, it's superior, spiritual, but also just in terms of the practical positioning of the body. Also, you should be looking up to her. It's above you in this way. And so the gurus, even the sensei in martial arts, the Next Karate Kid, they will train to see if you can take that lower position in a practical way. And only after seeing the students able to do that, then they would speak spiritual knowledge to the student, not otherwise. So that's a very important point. So Arjuna and Krishna's observing these qualities, at least it's implicit from the commentaries that he's observing these qualities. He's saying that Arjuna is having these qualities, and therefore he's a fit student for receiving spiritual knowledge. Otherwise, why waste time? If a person is not indifferent to the world, means that their interest is to enjoy matter, then this spiritual knowledge is not exactly for them at that particular point in their life trajectory, because their interest is not spiritual. Sometimes, for example, we mention this, or this is mentioned in the Bhagavatam. Who requires a guru? Tasma gurum prapadeta jignasu shayotama. Who is a person that requires a guru? What is your answer? Guru means spiritual teacher. Who requires a guru? What is your answer? Oh, what is your answer?
The student.
The student. Oh, so that's a clever answer. Yes. So what type of student requires a guru?
Who's looking for that thing?
Who is looking for that thing? What is your answer?
No answer.
No answer. Why not?
Just one who's inquisitive.
One who's inquisitive. There's so many questions. Like, what is this new, the Fantastic Beasts? When is that coming out? That is also a question. So what type of question?
A spiritual question.
Oh, spiritual question, existential question. So unless you're interested in those sorts of questions, then why do you require a teacher? You don't require a teacher. So the teacher will see if you're indifferent to these things, for example. If your mind is sense control, means what is your interest? Your sins are running out of the world, then why do you require this knowledge? So they will see if these qualities are there. And the most important quality, and this is the last quality or point we want to bring up today from today's discussion, 2.7. If you're able to learn verses, then this is definitely a verse worth learning. 2.7, Bhagavad Gita is very famous. 2.8 also is quite nice as well. But karpanya dosho uparata swabhava prichami tvam dharma samudacheta yashraya shanishchitam bruhitam me shishashteham shadimam tvam prapadnam. Oh, this verse you've learned. This is a very important verse. Only after this verse does Krishna actually speak the Bhagavad Gita. It is Arjuna practically surrendering to Krishna. And what does he say? Karpanya dosho uparata swabhava. My nature is afflicted by the fault of karpanya. Karpanya means miserly weakness. It actually refers to ignorance of the nature of spirit. The word karpanya, it means the avidya that we learned about in the first chapter. So my nature is afflicted by ignorance. Remember in our very first class, we discussed that this point you have to come to, that I am ignorant. Unless you genuinely, let's say that together. I am ignorant. How does that feel? It's liberating, right? I am
Ignorant.
very nice, very good. Now you have to say it like you believe it. I am
Ignorant.
So this is what Arjuna is doing in this particular verse. Karpanya doshotu parata swabhava. Unless you're actually convinced of that, why you will approach a teacher? The teacher is not meant for having conversation. The teacher is meant for learning from. What are you ignorant about? Dharma samudacheta. What is actually the right thing to do? What is to be done? What is not to be done? Usually we're a ball of confidence in this area, right? We always know what is to be done, what is not to be done. But he says, I don't know what is the right thing to do. What is the right dharma in this situation? Prichami, therefore I'm inquiring from you. I have questions. Not that I have comments. It's a very popular thing. Commentary culture. The teacher is speaking, and everyone's like, very nice. And I also wanted to make a comment. Just like many times when I'm giving class, I'll say like this, are there any questions? And everyone's like quiet, lip locked. And they say, are there any comments? 5 hands go up. Yes, I'd like to make a comment. Of course, there's some place for that when you're senior, especially. You expect that they would have comments. But when you're approaching a teacher, prichami, I have questions. Yashraya shan nishitam bruyat. You tell me definitively what is good for me, what is not good for me. I'm a disciple. I'm a soul surrender unto you. Please instruct me. Very important verse. Krishna may say to Arjuna, anyway, you are such a learned man. Why you need instruction from me? You're very learned. You only figure it out. You think deeply, and then you come to your own conclusions. So then Arjuna speaks the next verse. He says that I cannot figure out what is the knowledge that will remove this lamentation from my senses. In other words, all the knowledge that I have accumulated cannot help me with this problem. Our acharyas make a nice kind of dig at modern education in this way. That you learn so many things, but when you're suffering from this attachment problem, all that you've learned cannot help you. You may have a PhD in astrophysics or biomedical engineering or, whatever, some high calculus, this, that, and other. But when you're suffering from attachment, that knowledge cannot help you at that time. So he's saying all this sort of knowledge is not useful for dealing with this root problem of the soul, the problem of ignorance. And even if I attain a kingdom in heaven or earth, that will also not remove the problem. Oftentimes the thought is that if I improve my economic situation, then that would also help the problem. If I had more money, then I would be happy. That is a general concept. And although we don't like to think that we think like that, we think like that. If you get more money, you feel like, yeah, this is really nice. And you start working for getting more and more and more. So the general tendency is to think in this way. So Arjuna is saying, even this will not help. Therefore, I'm coming to you. My knowledge cannot help me. My opulence would not be able to help me. You please instruct me what is best for me. So Krishna smiles. He's like, all right. The reason for smiling is that the Acharya said that Krishna actually wanted to laugh because the rasa that he had with Arjuna was friendship previously. So with friends, you make jokes and you cut jokes. Actually, a friend is one who can disrespect you and get away with it. This is the meaning of true friendship, basically. Friends make jokes with each other, cut jokes. So usually in the friendship mood, Krishna might say, look at you now. You were talking that big game in chapter 1, but now look at you. This is friendship is like this. Friendship is like this. But now Arjuna has changed to rasa. Now he's come to Krishna in a surrendered mood. So Krishna cannot just laugh because now the mood is different. So he just smiled. They're trying to say, I actually wanted to laugh because friendship, he wanted to laugh, but now because of the serious approach, and serious approach means serious response has to come. So he just smiled a little bit, and then he will begin to speak the actual philosophy of Bhagavad Gita. So what we learn from this section is very important, and what are the qualifications of a proper student for spiritual knowledge? For ourselves, we may reflect on some of these qualities, and we may not be so accomplished in any one of these areas. And we have to also keep in mind that Arjuna wasn't exactly accomplished, at least from this point in the Gita, in all these areas. But he was able to demonstrate some level of indifference, mind and sense control, tolerance, and faith in the teacher. And Krishna, having observed that, agrees to teach the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. So although you can read the Bhagavad Gita yourself, in one sense, unless you go through this process, the same process that Arjuna went through, you cannot really learn the Bhagavad Gita. So Bhagavad Gita is a very popular book. Many people read Bhagavad Gita, many people quote from Bhagavad Gita, but you can see the difference between someone who's actually learned Bhagavad Gita through a proper system, like the one outlined here, versus someone who hasn't. It's a marked difference because Krishna does not agree to speak the Gita until Arjuna goes through this process. And in a certain sense, the Gita is not revealed to you, even if you read it, unless you also go through this process. Your knowledge of the Gita will remain somewhat or quite shallow. So that's 30 minutes. I'm finished with this passage. Here I printed out some questionnaire. It's for you all to work on. The online group, I don't know. I have to figure out a way to like screen share or something like that. Because we got quite a few people online who may want to also look at the questionnaire. I may have to send it. I don't know how to do it. I have to figure out a way to do this with the online thing. But that's not going to happen today. If you're on the Sacred Dialogues mailing list, you can just mail me. I'll send the questions to you. But we have a questionnaire here. You can work on the questionnaire together for the next 10 or 15 minutes. And then just for the question is just for helping assimilation of some of the points that are made here. There is one other point that I wanted to mention that I didn't mention, but my questionnaire is reminding me of. The first chapter was called Arjuna's Yoga of Dejection. So we had commented, how is yoga is generally something that is used to say connect to a higher reality. That's the way the word yoga will mostly be used in the Gita, to connect to the divinity. So the yoga of dejection, how does dejection become a way of connecting to the divinity? So in this passage of the Gita, we kind of see why this was called Arjuna's Yoga of Dejection. Arjuna is not the only one suffering from ignorance in chapter 1. Dhritarashtra is also suffering, Duryodhana is also suffering. But the chapter is called Arjuna's Yoga of Dejection. Because only that experience of suffering from ignorance led Arjuna to inquire from the absolute truth, from the guru, from the teacher, and receive knowledge. So that yoga and the yoga of dejection really refers to the inquiry, that taking the step to bring those questions to the guru. And then by hearing from the guru, becoming enlightened. So this is the reason for the first chapter being called Arjuna's Yoga of Dejection. Dejection is really the primary way in which all souls, in one sense, begin spiritual life. They have an existential malaise, something's wrong about life, and that leads them to many questions. And when they bring those questions to a proper teacher, then it is a type of yoga, the yoga of dejection. So very nice yoga system. So I was mentioning that point. So you can take these questionnaires and work on them together for the next 2 minutes. And then at the end of the class, we'll take any final thoughts or questions. Hariam Tat Sat. Sorry, online files. I have to really figure out a way to share a screen or something.
You can put it up to the camera.
I could put it up to the camera, but I don't know if it'll like.
You could do like a stand.
Oh, like that?
Tilt the camera down.
Yeah.
It's pretty. Yeah.
There's definitely a way to do this. 'Cause I've seen it on other YouTube videos, unless they're using something else. Okay. Anyway, so you guys can break off into little groups, 1, 2 people, 3 people, even whatever. Do a little work together. All right, online group. Apologies. I'll figure it out next time. On Tat Sat. I guess I could put it in the chat box, maybe. Oh, I could put it in the chat box. Let's see, since people are staying online. What happened?
This is not
Okay, I'm trying to put it in the chat box, but
and that because of not doing that, that is
I can't.
So first one is minus the window. He said that we doesn't want to second is he is immersed. Oh, it's right there. Third is so what asks different stuff. I don't know.
Wait, what? I can't figure this out. So I'm in this here.
Shut down. Because it's required. What inside the passage?
Actually, I think he was struggling because
Hmm.
he was having so much misery.
I don't know why.
He was still,
Oh, guy. Garland.
Actually, I cannot say problem. All his life,
What about Arjun's what is the status to one who can offer about chapter 1? What is status to offer? Because the yoga becomes a dejection and mental inquiry. He begins with that so this is the end of his yoga or the finishing of his yoga. Explain the significance of 2.7 in terms of cultural receiving spiritual assertion in the dominant presence. The cultural receiving spiritual dominance. So 2.7 it says about admitting your weakness to the teacher. And so that's
Seven
why,
tells about serenity.
yeah, first admitting yourself.
Yeah, now I'm confused about my
That there is a problem. Then he's saying that I want to learn.
should tell us more about his humility also. Yeah,
So there is two parts. First is there is being honest. And the second is also extremely doesn't know the solution.
I can find moments which are really lovely, which enjoy the constant. I will not be able to discriminate in the prosperous and I will
So this is further setting the problem. And he is run out of solutions. He doesn't know how to
just means that he's putting that he's incapable of navigating this situation.
Yeah, if I nothing will happen. Okay. And then problem it presents for the modern what is the problem?
Yeah, like Google Acharyas. We don't want to submit to look for the solution on Google and
But you know what?
lack of humility. Yes, self-appointed rules of ourselves.
Yeah, I think that Pakistan is not having any learning relationship. Like like real serious asking and
There are three aspects of Guru disciple thing. Pariprashna, Padhini, Pariprashna. So there is Seva aspect, there is Pariprashna aspect, there is
It's almost like
a very small part. But yeah, service and the
I guess this
I think I've figured it out.
you almost like I feel like there's a lot of the times
that knowledge of different scenarios, how they try to understand.
can I take one of those?
For $16. Dang it, dude. It costs $16, man. You can look at it. I will have it for the class. If you want to buy it, though, you can.
It's how is it? It's on
It costs $16 a print.
It's on the website.
I sent a soft copy out to you. Did you not get one? I thought I sent it to you also. I sent it to you.
They also send me.
Yes.
Yeah, so there are three aspects. First is you service, by internal service, education by service. Third one is
Oh, that's okay. Fine. Figured out the question. Okay. $16.
So what is the problem with that? For the modern man,
you don't have any of them. You don't want to search, you don't want to have
why
It's basically asking
Okay, I figured out how to put the questions in the chat box finally after everyone's left. Okay, ring, 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 ring. Okay, here we are. I finally figured it out. Okay, I finally figured it out. All right, ring, 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 ring. That's the bell. Okay, so final questions or comments are also okay. Or reflections, yeah.
I remember you said that we should keep in mind that Arjuna wasn't really completely endowed with all of these four qualifications, and that helped me. So my question is, because he doesn't seem to be showing indifference and tolerance, more he's partial to doing what feels good. He knows that that's a problem. So maybe in that way, I'd like you to clarify that, because maybe he doesn't seem to be indifferent and he doesn't seem to be tolerant. He seems to want to do what's pleasing. That's the cause of his breakdown. He's not indifferent to doing what is unpleasant. He wants to avoid that if possible.
Yes. So here's a comment that I read. He shows indifference, Arjuna, to the enjoyment of this life and the next. Usually we're interested in enjoying in this life. And then when we die, we want to go to heaven. And why do you want to go to heaven? To serve God, to enjoy also. And so he says that Arjuna is showing indifference to this idea when he says, I do not desire to kill them even if I have sovereignty over the three worlds, which is a statement from the first chapter. So in that statement, he's saying that he's showing some indifference, that he doesn't care about the celestial realms or the terrestrial realms or the subterranean realms. So again, he's attached to his something else, but it is not for just the sake of enjoying and the material. So in that sense, he's demonstrating some level of indifference, which is very hard to, just like that. Even if you're having some problem with something, you'll not speak like this. That I don't care for heaven or enjoying here. Yes, you do. You know, oftentimes, not oftentimes, you have this thing where you hear these like beautiful prayers from the scriptures. You know, Christian, whatever you want, as you see fit, then I'll do. But then when you go to actually offer that prayer for like the deities or something, like God, whatever you wait. Let me not get ahead of myself here. Then you start giving so many clauses to like do as you see fit, but make sure that this is there. Don't do it too heavy because I'm not that sincere. And so it's hard to just relinquish enjoyment like that. So Arjuna's apparently doing that. So Krishna is noting that. Okay, he has some level of indifference. When we talked about this in the first class, we mentioned that in order to receive any knowledge, truth, the nature of ignorance is that our perception of reality is exactly opposite to truth. So we defined that in the first class. And therefore, in order to receive truth, you have to be a little detached. So detachment means you're not going to be a renunciate, but you have to be enough detached that you're able to receive the truth that may be very much opposed to your vision of things. So a teacher will kind of notice that in the various students that are coming to him. Like if this guy is talking too much, he's fully attached to his own idea, then I'll not waste time speaking to him. This one is challenging a little bit, but he's questioning. He's a little confused. He has some doubt. He has some detachment. Okay, this one is. So they're just taking notes of these sorts of, So in Arjuna's state of bewilderment, he's certainly attached, but he's also demonstrating some element of detachment, some element of I don't know. And so that is also being accounted for. So Krishna is speaking to him.
How is he showing tolerance?
Tolerance means, well, because as a Kshatriya, psychologically, it'd be impossible for him to take up the profession of begging. But he's saying that he's prepared to be a beggar if that would stop the war. which apparently, as for the psychological disposition of such a person, that would be just an totally intolerable thing. We hear the story of Dhruva Maharaj, who was also a warrior, and he was just 5 years old. His stepmother slighted him, and he went to the forest for 6 months to, chastise her, basically. So they have these like very heavy egos. So for such a person to say that I'll live as a beggar, which is a very humbling situation for such a person, then he's showing that he's able to endure difficult situations, endure duality. So again, the Krishna, the teacher, is taking note of this. All these things taken together. He said, okay, this is a proper student for learning. Normally we think knowledge is our right. And in our modern culture, we have this whole, we're preoccupied with rights. I have a right to education. I have a right to this. I have a right to that. But in this culture, that's not so much its concern. No one is entitled to knowledge of any type. They will see if you were really serious about it. And then they will see that. So they're looking at this college. Oh, this is a proper student. You have to be selected. Even in modern times, you can't just show up to Harvard University like, I want to go here. Like, who are you? I'm so and so. I want to go. They actually see first if you're qualified. So also this is going on here. Yes. Any final question or comment? Yeah, Kishore.
Arjuna is submitting himself to God for being instructed.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it's pretty easy to understand. It's probably pretty easy for him to do that because Krishna is all-knowing. And so that faith is to have God standing before you ready to instruct you. You don't have too many hesitations about surrendering to him.
Mm.
Whereas in our current situations, there are so many different factors that play into that. We have our own skepticism, we have our own perception of what truth may mean to us, and in that way we search for people who may speak to that truth.
Yeah.
Or if we have an aversion to hearing truth, we may try to find faults in the teacher to find some excuse for avoiding being instructed. But in this way, there's so many nuances. So how to kind of get over that and to come to a platform of genuine inquiry to the spiritual teacher.
Yeah. In any spiritual life, sincerity is going to play a big role. And you can say the essence of sincerity is that I'm interested in the truth, even if I don't like the way it sounds. That has to be like the starting point. The starting point is I want the truth no matter how it appears to me, whether I like it or it reconciles or kind of validates my own way of thinking. If that's not the starting point, if you're just looking for the validating guru, there are different types of teachers. And one of the most popular ones is the validating guru. The one who just says that your own way of thinking is already okay, you're already enlightened, you're already wonderful, you're already nice, you're already perfect, or they validate your own way of thinking, then you'll also get that. You'll get someone who will validate your own position. But if you're not actually enlightened, that validation obviously isn't going to help you. So then you may have to wait for a little bit while longer until you get into the existential crisis that Arjuna was in. Remember, as we mentioned in the first chapter, Arjuna showed a certain level of confidence until Krishna pulled him right in front of his two major attachments and then said, kill them. So life is also somewhat like this until you're actually really forced to deal with those hard existential questions. They'll stay on the shelf, right? Just like now, we'll sit in the class and we'll ask some questions. I want to participate, ask some nice questions and so on. But when you're really in an existential, how you say, malaise is the word I've been using a lot, but when you're really forced to deal with those existential questions, and you're like on the point, like if I don't get to answer this, I might be suicidal or something like that level of discomfort, then you tend to get into a more sincere space where I just want the truth, because my validating gurus and my own way of thinking isn't actually helped me. So that has to be the starting point. And to be frank, it's hard to get to that starting point oftentimes it's hard to get to that starting point until you actually go through a situation where you're forced to deal with those questions. Those are the type of questions that just stay on the bookshelf for lifetimes. You just don't deal with those sorts of questions. You just deal with the easier questions: how to eat, how to sleep, how to find someone to mate with. These are the easier questions. They're also difficult, but they're easier. In modern times, some of these questions are also difficult to answer, but they're easier to answer. But then those questions stay like that until there's a certain situation that forces you to deal with them. Then you become sincere. So sometimes life has to make you sincere. I often have this, you've heard me say this before. You have two options in this material world. You can be humble or you can be humbled. And most of us are not smart enough to be humble. So, okay, Maya be there. She's like, I got this one. I got this one. The material energy, life itself. And when you're humbled, then you're usually either you're forced into utter despair, you become depressed, drugs, suicide. That is one option. Or you become sincere. I just want to know the truth, no matter how it is. Then after you get in that space, it's much easier to receive. You're less likely to be deceived because you're in that space of just say the truth. So that I guess that would be my answer. Otherwise, these types of how-to questions are very hard to answer because you're dealing with all sorts of mental stuff that really deceives in a very special way. You walk out thinking, yeah, I showed. It's very hard to answer these sorts of questions. So you have to be sincere, and often life has to make you sincere. Harm you enough that you are forced to actually deal honestly with those questions. And when you're dealing honestly, you realize that you don't have answers to them. You're not getting happier. So then you're obliged to go to someone who can help. I have an answer to that. Yeah, final thing so we can stop.
Final question.
Yeah.
So you were saying how Krishna was discerning Arjuna's qualifications, and you showed how the ability to tolerate becoming a beggar would be intolerable for the ordinary Kshatriya. So the Shantadhana, mind and sense control, how did Krishna discern Arjuna's qualification of sense control and mind control?
Well, here's a comment that comes. In verse 32 of the first chapter, he shows control of senses and mind by saying, what is the use of kingdom, enjoyment, and living? And that's the comment for that one.
Mhm.
So when the senses are in control, that is all you're concerned about. What is the use of kingdom, enjoyment, and living? No, there is much use. What are you speaking? Just like sometimes devotees, when they join Hare Krishna movement or some spiritual movement, they may also, what is the use of kingdom enjoyment and living? What is the use of marriage life? What is it? Parents are, no, what are you speaking? They're brainwashing you, they become concerned because their mind and senses are wrapped up in these things. So by Arjuna is saying like that, Krishna is saying, okay, he's not interested in just sense gratification. Otherwise, our senses are always interested in these things only. So in this way, he's made out this is a nice student, this good student for learning. Again, just because he's a good student doesn't mean he's not afflicted by attachment and so on. It just means that his potential is there because of these. He has a little bit of this mood, and that potential will be manifested. Okay, Hariam Tat Sat. We'll start there for today, and we'll get into the teachings, actual philosophy Gita, starting on Wednesday. Next passage. Thank you very much. Namaste. Okay, let me stop this and string.